Hi, my name's Matthew. This speech is about being open to trying new things and getting out there and being a little more adventurous. This story is going to be about the trip that my wife and I took to Amsterdam. I'll be discussing the traveling to Amsterdam with my wife and how that trip really became something that I'll never forget. I'm going to tell you about the trip that my wife and I took was to go see the tulips for our 10-year anniversary. So, my wife and I first I'll kind of give you the background of this trip. So, my wife and I never really had parents that traveled very much. When we were younger, they were always kind of the mindset of you need to keep your money, you need to save it for a rainy day, and they kind of always had the mindset that eventually, one day they would get around to doing it. Fortunately, that day never really came for them. So now they're older, they can't really travel because of their health. And my wife and I really didn't want that to be our story as well. So we wanted to get out there and be able to travel the world and see the places that we wanted to see before we got too old. So now that I've kind of told you the background behind why we wanted to take that trip, let me kind of tell you about the trip itself and what we did while we were out there. Initially, I was pretty anxious about taking this trip. I had some reservations because it's a really long flight. We don't know anybody out there. We didn't know what it was going to be like. We're kind of just walking into it blindly, which was kind of, both scary, but it was kind of exhilarating at the same time just to be able to get out of the United States and finally, take a trip that wasn't, within the USA. So we took a flight on the Royal Dutch Airline, and initially I was kind of hesitant because that flight is a very long flight, but the staff for the Royal Dutch Island were so accommodating and they were very, very nice. They even gave us like gifts while we were flying because they found out that it was our anniversary. It was a really nice flight. It just kind of made it go by really quickly, and it wasn't nearly as bad as I anticipated. Once we landed in Amsterdam, we were immediately enamored by kind of the architecture of Amsterdam and the layout of the city. There's nothing really like it in the States that I've ever seen. So it was really, really nice and a kind of a nice change of pace to see this different kind of architecture. Let me tell you about the stuff that we did on our trip. So one of the things that we did was we traveled to a bunch of different museums. We traveled to the Rijksmuseum, we traveled to the Van Gogh Museum, and we traveled to the MoCo Museum. They each had their own kind of own benefits and cool things about them. They had a lot of great art and sculptures and everything like that. The MoCo Museum is a little more modern, and it had more modern exhibits than the other two. While we were there, it actually had like a Banksy exhibit. And then at the other one, like the Rijksmuseum, we saw a lot of works by like Rembrandt and stuff like that, which was really, really cool to see. One of the other things that we did is that we traveled to see the windmills. There was a lot of different windmills out there. Unfortunately, there's not very many of them left. We did get to see a few of them, but there's less and less nowadays. They're kind of getting rid of them because there's not really a purpose for them, from what I understand. We also traveled to the Artis, which the Artis is the zoo in Amsterdam. That was actually one of the funner things that we did in Amsterdam, surprisingly. It was not like the zoos in the States that I'm used to going to. It was very open, if that makes sense. So a lot of the exhibits, they were kind of caged on one side. Like, for example, the exhibit for the giraffes, and it was like some sort of water buffalo. It was caged on one side, but then very open on the other side, and it was just like a small retaining wall. So like the giraffes could literally walk right up to you, but for some reason they just weren't leaving the exhibit. I don't know why that is. Maybe they're just really well taken care of. I thought it was kind of weird, but also very interesting. We also went and had a canal tour of the city. That was pretty cool because we had a pretty knowledgeable tour guide. He kind of gave us the history behind the city and all the different things that we're reviewing. There's kind of these two buildings as well called the the Crooked Sisters. I believe it was what it was, if I remember correctly. Were there two buildings that were built side by side together, and then there's like two buildings across from them, across the canal, that are called like the Twin Brothers, which was kind of an interesting thing. We went to the Anne Frank house. The Anne Frank house was interesting. You put on headphones, and so once you get inside, each room kind of has its own story to it. It was interesting, but also kind of depressing. If you know anything about the Anne Frank story, then you know what I mean. It's kind of sad. We also went to the the main reason that we went there is we went to the Kunoff, which the Kunoff is the botanical gardens in Amsterdam, and that's where all the kind of tulips are. And there's a lot of all kinds of different flowers, but it was one of the main reasons that my wife wanted to take the trip out there. And the garden itself is really nice. It's a magical place. There's so many different kinds of flowers, just every kind of color you can think of. It was very, very nice. So now that I've told you kind of about the trip, let me tell you the reasons and what I learned from taking that trip. I learned to be more adventurous. I learned to not necessarily just, when we first thought about taking the trip, I was more like, this is going to be such a hassle. It's such a long flight. I didn't want to do it, but it really turned out to be a great trip, and it really turned out to be something that I think I'll always remember. And then the other thing was, I learned to be more open to trying new things. I mean, we only have one life, and so you really got to get out there and do the things that you want to do in your life. So in conclusion, today I told you about the trip that we took, the reason that we took the trip, and kind of what we did there. And then I hope this inspires you to get out there and make your own trips. And you only have your one life, so live it like you want to. Thank you.